All right, everybody, back from vacation and good to go and ready to go with, I think, an interesting topic, interesting go-to topic for this comeback webinar, the protein con job. So just while I'm waiting for people to get on board, usually like to tell a few stories, etc. So got a good news, bad news situation here to sort of share. Um, from a couple clients this week, different clients in different areas, writing me. And a few of my clients have switched now to totally plant based. And it's been a while, so I've had them go get blood tests, etc. And some have got blood tests on their own. So a couple of them checked in with me this week with their blood tests, and good news is that their A1C levels had dropped substantially, which is also, great news, great news. The bad news on that is that even though their A1C levels dropped, their doctor's comments were ridiculous considering the time and era that we live in. Their doctor's comments, one of the doctors said to my client, wow, your A1C levels have dropped. You're in a really healthy range. You must really got control of your carbs. Good work. And then my client sort of informed him, well, actually, I've raised my carbs. My carbs are about 70% of what I eat. And the doctor had sort of a deer in headlights response to that kind of look. So unfortunately, we are still really, really lacking in terms of doctors and their nutritional knowledge, and doctors being as susceptible to common folklore and pop culture wisdom as everyone else out there in the consumer market. So that's very unfortunate, of course. And I thought I'd share that story. So many other stories to come as well. So, so I'm just waiting for people to get on board, and then we're going to talk about the big protein con job. Things are changing and changing fast in the nutrition industry. Not that the science hasn't been there, but I think the top 5 giants of the plant-based writers have finally put together all the research in a systematic way that dates back all the way to the 40s, etc., and has brought it together in a way that can be studied and put together and sort of used now in a way where there's very little doubt in terms of what nutrition protocol should be. Along that lines, I'm going to say that I find with the level of research and knowledge we now have, I think it is irresponsible, and I'm going to use that word capital and bold, irresponsible of trainers and coaches out there to advocate for any of their clients to eat meat. I just think the research is too overwhelming. And if you want to be someone who goes against the grain and be a rebel without a clue, just for the sake of being a rebel, then that's great. But that really shows that you don't have much concern for your clientele. So to advocate to a client to eat meat for any purpose with what we now know is really, really irresponsible. So waiting for people to get on board, but maybe that's it for today. So I'm going to hopefully you can all hear me and see me okay. Just let me know if that's okay, if you can. So Jolene, I'm back, and thank you that I look refreshed and tanned, and I'm downtown Scotty Brown, and I'm good to go. So I want to get into the whole protein con job that's been going on for decades, and that we are finally learning a lot about, and we're finally getting to the bottom of. So very, very important for me to elucidate some of these concepts to you that I'll be doing a lot in the future as well. So I'm going to bring up the lecture now and get everybody involved, and hopefully I can bring your comments to bear as well. And so hopefully you can see that, and you're all hearing me just fine, obviously. And I want to get into this in a big way. One of the things I do on vacation is research. Of course, I catch up on my research. I read. So it's very, very important that, I share with you what I've read, and I'm going to be doing that over the next several broadcasts for sure. But let's get into the whole protein con job. What do I mean? Well, I'm going to let you guys read along with the notes I made. Is protein the biggest, best nutrition con job of all time for marketers? Absolutely, positively, yes. I just came back from grocery shopping and I was going to take pictures of the supplement and protein aisle, but I just couldn't be bothered because it's so ridiculous. There was vegan protein, there was Vega, there was organic vegan protein, there was the usual industry stuff for muscle and blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's been around forever, but doesn't that reflect just how important protein is in the diet? Actually, it doesn't. What it reflects is a good way for any type of diet fitness protocol to make money by insinuating and imprinting into our minds from a young age that protein is that important. Now, it's not that it's not important, but we are just now taking it in super physiologic doses that are hurting us and not helping us. So this is what we really want to get into. So protein also creates a revenue stream, right? Even trainers and coaches out there now, they market protein supplements to their clients as a way to earn extra income. And I've always said I would never, ever do that. And I never have. So, and I know a lot of behind the scenes stuff as well that goes on. So I'm going to be telling you a lot of that as we go along. So there's no such thing. I've told you guys this in the past. There's no such thing as a protein deficiency of any kind in the modern era. It doesn't exist. Research advocates who talk about diet protocol, dietary advice, the one thing they're most concerned about in modern era, which isn't getting much better, is fiber. There's no concern for protein deficiency at all, whether someone works out or doesn't work out, whether someone's vegan, vegetarian, whatever. Now, this protein con job goes all the way back to Pumping Iron, one of my favorite, I told you, documentaries, docudramas of the fitness industry. Even Arnold knew in 1976. Arnold's doing a seminar at a prison, and for those of you who know the film as well as I do, there's a question that comes from the crowd: "Do you drink milk, Arnold?" And Arnold, being the wise ass that he was back then, says, "No, I drink beer. Milk is for babies." But because of the imprint and the advertising from dairy industry, even way back in the 70s, and the tying it to the importance of protein, we have this imprint in us that has existed ever since. And the fitness industry, diet industry has jumped on it and allowed that imprint to be something that makes us think that protein comes first and everything else comes second. And that's just a bunch of lies. So let's look at some of these lies, and hopefully you guys are interested. Feel free to do your comments or your emoticons, especially your emoticons. Facebook likes that. And hit your share button, because I'm going to be killing a lot of sacred cows, as the saying goes. Let's get into it. Well, Alicia's just saying she was in the ER and told the nurse she was vegan. The nurse immediately started rambling about protein. I asked her how many patients you had protein deficiency. She had no answer and started laughing. And there's even more to it than that. I mean, we keep thinking that vegans are somehow deficient when the research shows over and over again it is the healthiest diet on the planet. It's the best way to maintain weight, lose weight, and they have the best protein profiles as well. But that's a separate argument I've already looked at. Let's look specifically at the protein con job. But Alicia, thank you for that comment. I'll post it at the end of the webinar. What about the Handsome Bob connection? I'm probably going to have Andy on the broadcast later on, but he didn't have a chance to go these notes. So this is Andy's dog, Bob. One of our favorites. So what's the connection here? Well, one of the connections in the protein con job, the great protein con job, is the paleo lie. Omnivore, what we keep getting from people is they somehow think omnivore means carnivore. Omnivore does not mean carnivore. They are not the same thing. People keep conflating them as the same thing when they are nowhere near the same thing. Omnivore means can eat animal flesh. It doesn't mean meant to or designed to eat animal flesh. So for those of you out there who have Felix the cat or Fido the dog or Handsome Bob, let's examine what evolution really has to say about carnivores versus omnivores, etc. Okay, jaws, claws, and digestive tracts. If you own a dog or a cat, Felix the cat, Fido the dog, take a look, lift up their lips, look at their teeth, and look at their jaws. Unlike us, their jaws won't move side to side like this, like cows do and other grass eaters do. Their jaws only move up and down. And take a look at their teeth. Then take a look at their claws. Are our hands look like claws? And then take a look at some of the animals from the same kind of genre. So you have hyenas. Look what their mouths and their jaws look like, and their claws look like. Grizzly bears, etc. Lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. Okay, jaws and claws. Their teeth look different. Their jaws only move up and down, and their claws were evolved to rip apart flesh with fur and bite down on it. Their digestive tracts are much shorter, and that is efficient for a carnivore digestive tract. It's inefficient for a human digestive tract, our small intestine being 20 feet long. And as meat has to go all through that digestive tract, all kinds of nasty crap can happen. So, yeah, so this is part of the paleo lie, yet all respectable paleontologists have completely debunked paleo diet and have noted that hominids from the Paleolithic era, survived on plants. Humans evolved because of the ability to develop amylase, which is a starch enzyme, begins in the mouth. And because of that, they could roam. And that's what allowed humans not only to evolve, but to survive. That's one of the main differences between us and chimpanzees, and why chimpanzees are limited to a specific area in their natural environment. And that's very important. So another fact that we see in anthropology research shows that the more animal protein consuming cultures studied, the more disease is present. Boom. So what we see already is that we are overfeeding ourselves protein because we've been led to believe that it's that important. And I'm going to set up an argument for you now. So by the end, you will see just how little protein we actually need, and that we don't even need to be considering amounts, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm looking forward to getting to that point. So here I was in Aruba at this place called Garden Fresh, and look behind me there. On the shelf behind me is a bunch of different kinds of vegetarian and vegan protein powder. Again, hammering home this notion that protein is so important that you can't get enough of it from your food, even in an organic health food place called Garden Fresh. As a matter of fact, another place on the beach, Eduardo's, we were there one morning, and a couple of young people, everybody's young to me anymore, but a couple of young people, a girlfriend and a guy came in, obviously work out. And the guy ended up getting mad because Eduardo's on the beach didn't have his particular brand of whey protein. And I guess considering, that all of a sudden all his muscles are going to disappear because he didn't have his special, unique brand of whey protein, even though his girlfriend was right, even though he got mad at her, that he really didn't need it at the time. So very, very good. I'm going to get to JP just posted a good link. I'll get to that at the end. But this was just one example. As I was reading about protein research and the shocking things that we're about to learn and going to learn about it, was really, really mind-blowing. Like I said, things are changing fast in this, but because it's finally been put together, and that's what's really important. So the protein con job payoffs. Now, many of you know, many of you don't know, I was involved in the supplement industry for a long time as an endorsed athlete and an endorsed ghostwriter, things like that. The history of my travels around the world, for instance, way back when I was in Colombia, I had people approaching me because I was with Muscle Tech at the time, and how much Nitrotech should they buy, and blah, blah, blah. One time I was in Costa Rica, and I remember I was in San Jose, Costa Rica, and at the time I was someone who was, under the influence of performance enhancement drugs, steroid stacks, and whatnot. And I was always curious when I travel. In a lot of these countries, you could buy steroids right over the counter. So when I was in Costa Rica in San Jose, because I was in the magazines at the time, I had young lads, I was huge, like 260 pounds. I had young lads coming up to me all thrilled because they had Nitrotech, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember one young lad who had bought his Nitrotech, and he was wondering how soon he was going to put on muscle and all this stuff. And I asked him how much he made a month, and he made about $130, $140 a month. Poor people we're talking about here. And yet he shelled out $60 for a canister of protein powder. And yet when I walked into the pharmacia, and checked out the cost, I could have bought testosterone for $8, and I could have bought Decadurablin for $12. So two of the things I was taking at the time that, allowed me to put on muscle. But the protein con job had young lads like this, and it exists to today on very popular websites aimed at young lads who want to be jacked. All right. And it's that the magic is in the protein. So people get conned into believing the magic of protein in a canister, let alone animal flesh protein, which we're going to see there. So here I am. I'm reading Proteinaholic by Garth Davis, which all of you should read if you get a chance. A lot of it is a regurgitation of How Not to Die by Michael Greger, but a lot of it is also aimed specifically at protein, and I'll get to more of that another time. But here I am sitting in the Toronto airport, catching up on research and getting ready to fly to Aruba. And Toronto airport being very advanced, they have little tablets for menus, and the menus have ads. And sure enough, all the ads were, have you got your protein today? Are you traveling? Do you need your protein? And this was the exact same time I'm reading about the protein con job and how sick it's making people in the Western world. And I'm like, wow. So even when we went vegan shopping at the supermarket and the vegan restaurants in Aruba, like I said, overplay the importance of protein because that's what people want. At the Garden Fresh, this picture of me that I showed you before, and Eduardo's on the beach, they also had, under the various headings of smoothies and stuff you could buy, they also had protein power and protein punch, and just giving the consumer what they've been led to believe. So look at it this way, folks. No matter what diet you are on, there's a canister of processed protein for it. Paleo, keto, Atkins, vegetarian, vegan. Here's a more interesting thing that Garth Davis points out in the beginning of his book. Protein is the essential element for bulking up. It's also the essential element for cutting up. Doesn't that seem like a contradiction? Here's the thing. Protein isn't the solution to losing weight or gaining muscle. It's the problem. So protein is the one constant in all these diets, paleo, Atkins, omnivore, whatever, and yet obesity continues and weight loss continues to elude most people. Why is that? Well, first, it was all about blaming the fats. Then it was all about blaming the carbs. So very, very important that we start seeing the elephant in the room that doesn't eat meat. So this goes back all the way to the 40s. So questions that I get and even receive, now I'm almost 57 years old, so it was surprising to me to get comments, while I was traveling about, being impressed with my physique and things like that. I mean, I got more wrinkles. I should be part Shar-Pei by now. But anyway, it was flattering to say the least. But I would get questions from people, hey, you obviously work out. Is figuring out protein needs in grams really necessary? No. Okay. I don't believe in macros at all. And we'll get to that down the road. And any of you who have read any of my books already know that. I don't work with numbers, haven't worked with numbers. Our body is just too wise to need numbers, but we think we know better from the outside in, as it goes with Fitbit and the rest of the crap that's out there that tells us that everything about us needs to be measured to be accurate. Now, what I was part of back in the day, writing for the magazines, was the big con job. What's the best quality protein powder? These were articles that we would write every 6-7 months. That was one of the biggest con jobs. And you know why? One, it was usually an advertorial. In other words, it was presented like an editorial, but it was really to drive people to one specific product, a protein supplement. But also, you plant the idea in people's heads just by reading it that protein is so necessary, and protein powder in particular, that we need to rank them in order of which one is the best, so that we never question whether we need them at all. So that's the thing. It imprints into you, wow, this is really important. I got to have not just my protein or a quality protein, but then you get into the whole identity thing and all that, where, if you're an MMA fighter, you buy a certain kind of protein. If you were a bodybuilder back then, you bought a certain kind of protein. If you affiliate with a certain website, you buy a certain kind of protein. This is all part of the big protein con job. Just like back in my day, the advertisements for milk, it does a body good. Actually, it doesn't, but it's imprinted into our head. So we start believing we need these things, and we start to get reductionist about it. Like, we need calcium. That's why we need dairy. And even though the research shows that the people with the highest dairy have the most bone issues and osteoporosis, that's again for another time. And the big one I get still to this day, where do you get your protein? How do you keep your muscle? How do you stay lean? Now, ironically enough, Ange and I were having dinner at a really fine Italian restaurant, and a young lad serving us, just a really likable, lovable young lad. And, he's flexing, and he says he's trying to put on muscle, and he's asking me about protein and how do I keep my muscle. Now, when he would let me talk, I kept saying carbs. But every time I said carbs, he would jump in and say, yeah, I try to cut my carbs, but carbs are in everything. And it was funny because we're in an Italian restaurant, and I just ordered a big second helping of spaghetti with tomato sauce. So I said, no. You're asking me, how do I keep my muscle and how do I stay lean? It's because I eat carbs. And I reminded him, what am I eating right now, right in front of you? Like, I'm eating spaghetti with tomato sauce, and I had a side of polenta. Like, I had no protein at all, and other than what comes with those foods. And yet people can't get past that in their own minds. And that's because the protein con job goes back a long, long way, and it's being misrepresented. And I'll get to the low carb lies and politics for profit in a couple slides. So, and then protein cons and con jobs go reductionist, just like I said. Now you had protein powder that you need to have a certain one kind in the morning and another kind at night. So casein for nighttime, because that did all these wonderful things. And then, of course, branched chain amino acids, which I completely debunked in a previous webinar. You can find that on my YouTube channel, where the research doesn't support branched chain amino acid supplementation. But the research says something else. Casein and cancer are definitely linked in vitro studies and otherwise. The animal protein casein shown to be 5 times more effective in raising cholesterol in experimental rabbits than plant protein soy. And there's the research there, experimental atherosclerosis and high protein diets. And then the other one by the same author, effect of high protein diets on experimental atherosclerosis of rabbits. All right, you guys are having your own conversation without me, Stephen and JP. Wait for me. And then the one I have these 3 red stars, asterisks beside, in a human study. Now, pay attention here. It's important. Replacing dietary protein, mostly animal-based, with soy protein lowered serum cholesterol much more effectively than lowering dietary fat. Here's the thing here. Too often, fat and protein are associated together. But what this study showed, it was the dietary protein, replacing that with soy protein, plant protein, lowered serum cholesterol much more effectively than lowering dietary fat did. So that's really, really an important development, an important thing to understand about protein in supraphysiologic doses that we're taking in the modern era. And here's some of the research there. And you can find that Current Topics in Nutrition and Disease, Volume 8, Animal and Vegetable Proteins and Lipid Metabolism and Atherosclerosis, 1983. That's the editors in that big giant book as well. Now, meantime, let me just see if Andy's with me yet. No, he's not. Okay. Meantime, to quote T. Colin Campbell, who wrote an article about all this, saturated fats versus protein, etc., and I'm quoting him here, hence the quotation marks. A few decades later, during the 1940s to the 1990s, so that's a long time, okay, because we want to get people, the meat and dairy industry want to get people buying. This protein effect, and notice I bolded that, continued to be ignored in favor of a fat effect, both for heart disease and certain cancers, based both on experimental animal evidence and human population correlation studies. But once again, the human correlation studies claiming a fat effect could just as easily have been due to animal-based protein because of the very close correlation between these two nutrients. Notice how I put animal-based protein in bold. So what Campbell is saying, and I'll finish the quote, but still, again, the evidence favoring animal-based protein as the causal factor mysteriously was not told, even though the evidence, and I put this in green and underlined it, even though the evidence in the population studies clearly showed that it was animal-based protein, instead of plant-based protein that accounted for their increasing rates of disease. Boom, pam, pow. We are eating way too much protein, whether it's low fat or non-fat, and research is pretty clear on that. But what Campbell's pointing out in this article is, look at, you have the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and into the 90s, where we go reductionist and we start looking at fat is the issue. So in my day and age, everything was about low fat, right? And we've come back to that, but I'll get to that later. So everything was low fat, low fat, low fat. And then what happened in the 80s and 90s, Atkins comes along and no, you've got the wrong villain. The villain really is carbs. So around the 80s, early 90s, 2000s, we go Atkins and we go low carbs, low carbs, low carbs, higher fat, higher fat, higher fat. Who's the hero in all this? Protein remains the hero, just as Colin Campbell's saying here, for decades and decades. So you can still have your burgers and fries and you can still have your hot dogs at the game. And yet no one is looking at what is staring them in plain sight, that protein ends up being one of the causative factors and one of the issues we need to consider. Here's some of the research now. Let me just get rid of this so you can see that better. So here's some of the research. Lipids and carcinogenesis in the Journal of Environmental Pathology and Toxicology, 1980. So you can see this goes back. Again, Carroll, Dietary Fats and Cancer, American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, 1991. See how we're going 80s, 90s. Armstrong, et al., Environmental Factors and Cancer Incidence and Mortality in Different Countries with special reference to dietary practices, International Journal of Cancer, 1975, and then Carroll again, Fat and Cancer in the Journal Cancer, 1986. So what we start seeing, like I said earlier, is in places and countries known to have the highest animal source intake, we also see a correlation to the higher disease rates and ill health in all ways, shapes, and forms. Now, let's consider the deeper logic here. And again, going back to T. Colin Campbell, quote, combining the disease causal mechanisms of animal-based foods. Okay, so again, what he's saying is disease caused by animal-based foods with the absence of disease preventative mechanisms provided by plant-based foods is additive. Now, I've underlined that and I've put it in green for a reason, because he's saying two separate things here. The more animal-based products you ingest, the more direct causal issues to ill health. And on the other side of that coin is the very opposite. The more plant-based foods you eat, the more disease prevention and ill health prevention you get. So what he's saying is these two things become additive. So if you eat more animal products, you're getting less of the disease prevention. And so it goes. And that's what cross-cultural studies show. So he says this will undoubtedly lead to and account for effects that are much larger than those resulting from a single nutrient, whether it is protein or fat or any other nutrient. Meantime, research, what I was discovering while I was on my trip and the research that a lot of you have sent me and other research, we know that methionine, leucine, lysine, arginine, carnitine, and IGF-1 increase risks of various cancers and health issues. Methionine, particularly, which even though it is an essential amino acid, when these things are consumed beyond the RDA, we know that there's potential health risk with all of these things. And yet, in the fitness industry in particular, we have people supplementing pills and potions of ill health. How many people out there, especially female competitors, they're on their L-carnitine to burn fat? Well, we know that wreaks havoc for ill health now. We know bodybuilders from my era, not just using growth hormone, but finding IGF-1. And what we know is IGF-1 allows cancer to grow like cancer's on steroids. So here we are. I'm at the supplement section of the pharmacy. I'm at the supplement section of the grocery store, and I'm seeing things for sale that we now know actually cause ill health. And why? Because we want to up our protein. We want to up anything associated with protein. Because for those of you who don't know, a quick nutritional trick, if you're studying nutrition, one of the first things you learn is that anything that ends in INE is usually an amino acid. So very, very important. So it makes no sense to me. Now, I have always said it's never about protein. It's about the protein-sparing nutrients. But modern nutrition research into the whole food plant-based diet takes this to a whole new level. So fitness industry culpability, you can find this on most websites. And look what we find. We find arginine as a supplement, and forget about the brand names. I really don't care. We just dug these out, on purpose. There's methionine right there. There's L-carnitine. There's the branch chain plus lysine. We know all these things risk ill health. We know all these things make you sicker. We know all these things don't make you better. So the fitness industry keeps promoting this. Hey, if you're an insider like us and you really know what's good for you, you take these products. What does research and science and the top people in the world have to show us? These things are all associated with ill health, and yet we call it the fitness industry. I mean, look at the lines of products in the background of that, in the top end of that picture. So absolutely ridiculous and upside down when you think about it. So hopefully you guys are getting this, hitting your share buttons, hitting some emoticons, because it should just make your head scramble. It makes my head scramble, and my head, doesn't usually scramble so easily. But we need to start talking about this. We need to start getting this out here. I've been saying for over a decade now that you don't need supplements and supplements are risky, but now we can get reductionist with that as well. We know arginine leads to cancer, and we know all these other things. And here at Bodybuilder Plate Heads are ingesting all this stuff, thinking the more the better. Well, the more the better, and the quicker you're dead. And I'm going to address in a future episode all these bodybuilders that I knew personally that died. What was the connection with IGF-1, and what was the connection with the high levels of protein they were taking? Some of them up to 400 grams of protein because they thought that was the secret. And yet, they died in their 40s and sometimes younger. So buying cancer, that's exactly right. So more from Campbell. Animal-based protein itself. Now notice how I put that in bold. Boom. When fed at dietary levels above total protein recommendation, an amount readily provided by whole plant-based foods may, 1, increase normal cell growth as evidenced by increased levels of insulin-like growth factor, thus also accelerate cancer growth. Boom. 2, increase enzymatic activation of chemical carcinogens to cause mutations and incite carcinogenesis. Boom. 3, dispose of energy in a manner that favors cancer promotion. Boom. 4, increase production of reactive oxygen metabolites that encourage cancer growth, cell aging, and atherogenesis. Boom. Depress immune system cells that kill cancer cells. So animal-based protein, when fed at dietary levels above the RDA. I want to get into this because people don't understand what the RDA for protein is. It's extremely low if you live in any of the developed world. We all grew up. I even wrote articles on 1 gram of protein per pound of lean body mass and all that stuff. Well, the RDA for protein now sits around between 40 and 50 grams of protein a day, and that allows for a real buffer level of insurance. In other words, it's deliberately set even higher than it needs to be. So you're living in Canada, United States, Australia, the developed world, and you're going out of your way to look for protein that's making you sick, that's making you inflamed, all these other things. Or you're wondering why you can't keep the weight off when you're on low carb or low fat. And it's because of the elephant in the room that no one's talked to you about, because you think protein is so very, very fundamentally important. And here's some of that research. I've done this piece of research before. Repression of hepatitis B virus, transgene, and HBV-induced liver injury by a low protein diet. In other words, go low protein and prevent a bunch of cancers. The next one I put 3 asterisks beside, because this is very important. Protein oxidation associated with aging, who doesn't want to look younger and feel younger, is reduced by dietary restrictions of protein or calories. And this, in this particular example, we're talking about dietary restriction of protein. So one way to age faster is take in more protein. And I always said when I left the bodybuilding world, one of the things that struck me whenever I would come across someone that I knew from that world is how old they look for their age, especially if they were, which I knew most of them were hardcore drug users, which retains a lot of protein in the body. And look at the results. That most of them, they're going bald, blah, 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 but they look older than they actually are. So protein oxidation associated with aging reduced by dietary restriction of protein. So, and then there's a couple other studies there. The final study there, gut flora metabolism of phosphatidylcholine promotes cardiovascular disease, and that's in the journal Nature 2011. Why I wrote that down, folks, here's another little insider story. I was known as an advisor to several supplement companies because I did the ghostwriting. I was a paid endorsed athlete. Back then, there was one company that was going against another because they had intellectual property theft and a bunch of nonsense I don't need to get into. But I uncovered that phosphatidylcholine might actually enhance protein absorption if we put it in a protein powder. And so everyone jumped on it. Every company and their brother was promoting phosphatidylcholine, blah, blah, blah. And then they started promoting it just separately for other health reasons. But what we see here is metabolism of phosphatidylcholine promotes cardiovascular disease. So once again, the fitness industry has it wrong, and they're trying to promote something that's actually promoting ill health. So very, very important. So protein and ill health. I'm going to get to your comments, folks. Just let me form the argument. There's good comments coming in as always. Boom. I'm glad I have smart followers. So these are just some of the research findings that illustrate other non-protein-based mechanisms that are still intrinsic to a high-protein diet that cause heart disease. Boom, bam, pow. Low-carb pundits and profiteers and researchers continue to ignore a major role of protein regarding ill health. As Campbell emphatically stated, and this is quoting him, "I am confident that protein is the main behind-the-scene factor causing this cascade of events." And the events he's referring to are ill health events. So this is really, really important stuff. So here's the con job mantra. When I was with supplement companies, this is how it worked. This is definitely how it works in the current day and age of low carb lies and the politics for profit. Very, very important. What you need to do is traffic and confusion. That's the business of supplement company hucksters selling diet books, especially low carb books, and now even so-called documentaries like The Magic Pill, which I'll get to in a second. The other thing you do is sow doubt. Sowing doubt with a repeated message or how you con pop culture masses, the mass consumer market, into believing a single propaganda idea. This is an old trick from cigarette ads back in the 1950s. It reminds me also of, oh God, I hate saying his name, Donald Trump, with everything he doesn't like is fake news. So keep sowing doubt, keep repeating that same message over and over, and people start seeing that as the truth, even in the face of evidence to the contrary. So the way you make a market is you traffic in confusion and you sow doubt about the facts. And that's what low carb lies are all about. The Magic Pill documentary is really a docudrama. And this is becoming more common because the meat and dairy industry continue to be threatened and lose revenue because of the ever-increasing body of science in regards to a whole food, plant-based diet for health promotion and even for looking great, and the mounting evidence of animal protein and health destruction and disease risk. So you've got the more plants you eat and block out animal protein, then absolutely the better your health. And then the more animal protein you eat that blocks out plant protein or plant foods, then the more health destruction you get. So one of the low carb lie tactics alive and well in this faux documentary about the beauty of ketosis is equating processed refined carbs with all carbs. This is done all the time in this kind of nonsensical argument. Equating a bag of Doritos with brown rice with chopped up fibrous veggies in it is absolutely ridiculous. This is called a spurious claim. It is about the same thing as saying since over 90% of serial killers are white men, then all white men are potential serial killers. This is the kind of logic that's used to traffic in confusion and sow doubt. The whole Magic Pill was all about anecdotal evidence. And the docudrama has been obliterated and debunked for its nonsense. I can address that another time if people want me to, but I hate giving attention to lies. So people often ask me, will you talk about this? Will you talk about that? I don't want to talk about these things because it draws attention to lies and liars and schemers. So that's what bothers me. For instance, Joe Rogan keeps talking about vegan propaganda. It's science and research are not propaganda. And to call it so is like calling a fact fake news. It just makes no sense in the face of real science and research. Someone like T. Colin Campbell, who's devoted over 50 years of his life to looking and finding the truth, is very important stuff. I see Andy's with me. I'm going to have him on board in just a sec. I'm sure I'm missing something that he'll add to because Andy actually sent me some of this research. So instead, the Magic Pill, they just ignore, like, why didn't this so-called documentary go after and debunk the mountains of science and research supporting a carb-based, plant-based diet? Why? Because they can't. Why doesn't Joe Rogan have Michael Greger or T. Colin Campbell or any of these people on his podcast? Because he would eat their lunch for them. They would take the meat out, but they would eat his lunch. So they don't have these people. They just use words like vegan propaganda. It's kind of like watching Fox News. So this is the kind of nonsense that gets played out, and then again, sow confusion, sow doubt, and then you confuse people. And then what people do is they retreat to what they want to believe rather than what the truth is. People will retreat to what they want to believe. So tell a big fat fatty that bacon is their best friend, and they're likely to believe it as long as you repeat the message enough and then use some weird examples where someone actually did it. So the anecdotal evidence in the Magic Pill was a young girl with these issues of autism or whatever, eating Doritos and faux faux food, chicken nuggets are copied and etc., and then switches to whole foods, well, of course you're going to see health benefits from that, from getting off plant foods. But that has nothing to do with jumping to the insane conclusion that that's because of ketosis. So unfortunately, people will like to use pseudoscience and then take other science out of context to manipulate other people to buy into an idea. Now, that's it for that lecture. But as a side note, for some of the things I witnessed, one of the things you need to know, and a couple things you need to know, and then I'm going to bring Andy into the conversation. So any diet or diet strategy to work has to be sustainable, has to have proper natural biosatiation is a must. Therefore, learning to appreciate and respect the messages from the body is a must as well. The point being is a diet isn't necessarily a diet strategy or a diet lifestyle. And we got to stop thinking in short-term windows of time like 12-week transformation contest or keto that works really well up front as long as you can get through keto flu and handle all the side effects, which is ridiculous, but that's a whole other context. And the message is, hunger itself obliterates self-control and self-discipline in all ways and means and manners of commitment to an idea. So let me just bold that. Hunger obliterates self-control and self-discipline in all ways and means and manners. So while we were out eating in Aruba at Iguana Joe's, again, things seem to happen to me all the time when I'm on vacation, there was a table right beside us, taking selfies and stuff. And there was a table of three pretty big ladies and pretty loud. One of the ladies says, as the food comes, they're taking pictures of the food, they're taking pictures of each other. And one says out loud, "This is what food looks like after a diet." And it's nachos covered with cheese and everything else. Well, they had one plate of nachos, then they had 2 plates of nachos. They ordered appetizers. I was getting sick watching them binge eat. And now I'm a cycle dieter, and a lot of people confuse the two. But binge eating and refeeding are vastly different things. These ladies were eating out of control because of post-diet, which she actually said, "This is what food looks like after a diet." And they were cursing and swearing and other things and like, screw the diet and all this. And these were big ladies. And then they got doggy bags to go. It was unbelievable. And it was almost threw me off my own appetite watching. They ordered, I forget how many plates of nachos. I think it was 2, maybe 3. And then they ordered appies, like they had these other things they were eating and burgers. And then they took doggy bags to go to eat in a couple hours. I mean, they were seriously on a food bender. So, that just reminded me to make this point that hunger obliterates self-control and self-discipline in all ways and means and manners. So that's just a side note that we must regard satiation and the hunger satiety feedback loop. So conclusions based in science, appealing to ill-informed, uneducated people, and I mean uneducated about nutrition, only about weight loss and only in terms of low carbs versus low fats, misses an issue that's hiding in plain sight. The use of animal protein-rich diet and its relation to ill health in general, and by ill health, I mean weight gain, diabetes, cancers, and other issues. The conclusion should be obvious. Opt in favor of a whole food, plant-based foods, naturally low in fat and very low in animal protein, at least very low compared to the common imprinted notions of what quality protein even is. In other words, protein doesn't need to be calculated or figured out or computated as part of some complicated and ridiculous macro formulation. Boom, bam, pow, end of story. And I will keep drumming this into your heads because the fitness and bodybuilding industry is way behind the science, and they refuse to. They're doing hear no evil, see no evil, la, 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 I can't hear you. Let's stop being ignorant. And like I said at the beginning, I think it's totally irresponsible for any trainer or coach out there to be advocating their clients or anyone under their influence to be eating meat, knowing what we now know. But if you absolutely need numbers to crunch, then the 80-10-10 is pretty much the new gold standard. without being married to these numbers, of course, and spending your time on Fitbit. 80% carbohydrates, 10% protein, 10% fat. As a matter of fact, just work to get your carbs up. What I did, and I'll be talking about, I got back from Aruba. One of my carryover meals from previously was I had cashews mid-afternoon with a certain amount of tomato juice, still plant-based, but higher fat. So what I did since I got back from Aruba is I tossed that meal, and now I have rice with corn and peas to take the fat lower and take the carbs higher. And the higher I take the carbs, the more I seem to be able to eat. And that seems to be a very, very common thing as well. I know Andy's given me the thumbs up on that one. So I'm going to bring Andy into the conversation. It's about time we had some good looks to go around. And Andy, just be patient, because I'm also going to go back and give some commentary in there. So are you with me, my friend?
I'm here. Happy to be here.
Good to see you, brother. It's been a while.
Good to see you. Nice tan.
Thank you. I'm downtown Scotty Brown. So what did I leave out? What did I miss there? What did you want to add? I got Handsome Bob in there for you. I don't know if you saw that, but
did you? Oh,
yeah.
I think like that one study on dairy really blew me away. Just with the casein. Like I think back to the amount of dairy that I've consumed in my life. Like I was raised on 2% milk. I drank liters of that per week. Even into recent years on cheat days, I'd have the odd protein shake just for convenience, but certainly nothing I relied on. But I mean, that just blew me away. Just how, the casein in milk is actually causing more heart disease and inflammation of endothelial cells than saturated fat. I mean,
and people forget too that T. Colin Campbell was raised on a dairy farm. So if there was anyone with a reason to protect how he grew up and protect a certain bias, it was him. But he was strong enough to follow the research and say, wow, here's the undeniable facts, unlike Joe Rogan and the rest of them that want to just call everything that they don't want to believe propaganda. Here's a man that, looked for the truth, found it, and abided in it. So I want to get to Alicia's initial comments. So you can see the comments, can't you, brother?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So Alicia, one of the first things I posted, she was in the ER and told the nurse she was vegan, and the nurse immediately started rambling about protein. And then she asked her how many patients you've treated for protein deficiency. She had no answer and started laughing. But it goes way beyond that, of course, as well. You just reminded me, I didn't even think of this till you just said it. I had a client, a bodybuilder. He was pretty good. He went up to the Ontario level and won. And he had a serious milk addiction. Like he off season gallon a day, it was just milk with every meal. And on cheat days, can I have milk? Can I have milk? Can I have milk? And this is anecdotal, of course, but so was most of the movie, The Magic Pill. Should call it The Magic Swill, but that's another, anyway. I just found out he died. He died in his 40s as well. And I'm just wondering if there's a connection there with his love of milk, because this guy drank more milk than I've ever seen. So, JP is.
Man. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, my old man, my dad, he's been drinking 2% milk his whole life. He eats red meat, and he just had to go on Lipitor. So, other than that, his diet's pretty healthy. But those two things, I told him, you should probably think about cutting those out, and you probably won't have to take Lipitor. But I mean, that's like telling Bob not to eat dog food, right? Like it's just...
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? And we've talked about that. We've talked about how this is ingrained in people, and they just don't want to hear what they're not ready to hear. And that's a reality that we have to face. And it was in an article I was reading as well about, sometime the vegan scream is too loud and it just turns people off. Blah blah blah, and we get that, but at the same time, I mean, we can't ignore. Like this whole lecture was about.
People need to
know. Even though he squeezed, most of his diet is healthy, those animal products squeeze out plant-based product. Anyway, JP is just saying Dr. Milton Mills has an awesome detailed presentation on YouTube. Are humans designed to eat meat? As you know, I referred earlier. You must have been late to the party, buddy, but I used a picture of Handsome Bob to illustrate
right
the point that that we don't have
We're not true omnivores.
we're carnivores. We're not true carnivores. We don't have the jaws, the claws, or the rest of how carnivores evolved. So that's important. And JP just left the clip right there on YouTube for those who are interested. So Stephen, who's a regular contributor, just saying he fell for the Muscle Tech Pro hormones back in the day. Things like this, and I was part of that process as well. Very.
I sent you an old picture, an old ad that I was in. I don't know if you can post it up before and after from the old biogenetics. I sent it to your Skype, so I don't know if you can put that up here. But
we'll use it next. Yeah,
that was complete. The company's not even around anymore. But I mean, that was complete bullshit, right? So,
well, it's kind of around because it was a sub company of a parent company, right? We don't need to get into that, but So Veronica's just asking, so do I have to drink my coffee black now? No dairy, no protein powder. Well, you shouldn't have protein powder anyway, but hey, I still have cream in my coffee. I think it's the 90% rule. But the more of the big stuff you can eliminate, Veronica, the better, that's for sure. And do it on if you're the type of person that can't go, cold turkey, then, no pun intended, then, just start eliminating the big things, like go plant-based with your protein. So very important. Go ahead, buddy.
No, I would almost compare it to the concussion issue in football, right? Like people need to know that protein can do, can afflict ill health in them. Like it's not this, magic macronutrient that it's made out to be. I mean, you look at football, the NFL denied concussions lead to brain injury and dementia, Alzheimer's, all those years, knowing that it did. And I mean, players had to know that. I mean, they could have made an educated decision on whether they actually wanted to play football or not, right? So,
and if people want to read or watch the movie Concussion, what you'll see there, what Andy's referring to, what you'll see there is a similarity in what happens in nutrition research, what happened to T. Colin Campbell, the doctor who devoted his life to people understanding CTE and concussions, et cetera, et cetera. What do you do when you don't like the message? You attack the messenger. So they started calling him, they were making up all kinds of stories about him, the NFL was, and they were trying to sort of dismiss him as a quack and all these other things, even though he was a reputable scientist with all kinds of degrees coming out as yin yang. And they did the same thing to T. Colin Campbell when his research wasn't going the way the dairy industry and the meat industry wanted it to. And
his professional career was threatened, I think, at one point. Like he was, he was being ostracized, basically.
Yeah, and that's how it goes. There's a lot of politics involved, even in academia, but we can wade through it now. We have the density of research that's been organized by what I call the big five researchers in plant-based research. So Adam's just saying, agree with your body doesn't need 1 to 2 grams of protein per weight to increase muscle fiber. And I'm going to go the other way, Adam. It's a good point. I'm going to go the other way. All these people that I deal with who struggle with weight and like the book Proteinaholic says, their number one concern is always with protein. Maybe that's your problem. Maybe get rid of that as a concern and just abide in animal-based products, the 80-10-10 rule. There's some weird raw vegan diets that I'd like to refer to, but I won't right now. Extremes are extremes no matter what. How healthy extreme is still orthorexia. But the examples that are there, I'm not going to, I'll save it for another webinar, but very important. So Jared is just saying, if anyone wants a funny comedy clip about milk and health, watch comedian Lewis Black's bit on the problem of milk today. I saw that. It was quite funny. And Brian Krause. I think this is the Brian Krause that I know from. Oh, maybe it isn't. Of course, I couldn't tell you what the source was, but in relation to the classic 1 gram of protein per pound lean body mass, well, guilty, Brian. I'm one of those sources from way back in the day. I wrote plenty of articles for muscle magazines along those lines. Some studies about this was important to optimize muscle development. Can you speak to this study? Was it off the mark or misleading somehow? Well, it was misleading in the fitness industry for sure, Brian, but now we know that that's just not true. And again, especially in the fitness industry, everyone loves to play doctor. Everyone loves to sound like we in the fitness industry, we just got a handle on things that the medical community doesn't. So when we can start to make formulas and macros, and if it fits your macros, and aren't we smart? And it's sort of, it's a lot of uneducated people trying to sound like they got degrees when they really don't. But again, the research is overwhelming. What I would say to you, Brian, is give a quick read. Well, not a quick read, but give a good read of Proteinaholic. I'll be using a bunch of the research in future webinars that was in there, specifically separated the fat and the protein. He also has sections where they're together, but you will see the problems that protein poses. But for me, it's for people, you know, at my age and stuff, I'm done with the hardcore world. And then again, you know, I would like to see people who have struggled with weight for a lot of years, and yet if you've struggled with weight for a lot of years, I'm looking right at you right now, what would be the one common denominator in every diet you've tried? Whether it was low carbs or low fat, the common denominator was what? Protein. And you can't keep the weight off. I think that's a big enough message right there. That's the elephant in the room. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, I've gotten leaner being a vegan without trying to get leaner, basically. Like
Me too.
I've had people asking me if I'm getting ready for a show. I guess there was a show in Kelowna here last week or the week before. So people.
Oh, thank God I missed that weekend.
Yeah. I had a few people asking me if I was getting ready for that, and I was just, you know, I didn't know what they were talking about, right? So, but yeah, I maybe get between 30 and 40 grams of protein a day now. I don't know. I don't care to even count.
Yeah, I'm not, but I had to up my, I was doing a cup of, my dinner meal was a cup of either the big three, either black beans, lentils, or chickpeas. And I've had to add to it. I mean, it's just, you know, I'm just keep adding.
Yeah.
Boy, I really want to go ahead.
No, I've had to increase a lot of portions too, as well. Just because I found I had to, my hunger and energy levels were starting to go down a bit. And so that's the body telling you more carbs.
Yeah. And I mean, we're telling you folks, the higher you make your carbs, plant-based, whole food, of course, let's not get silly. But the more you crowd out animal protein and fat, the happier you're going to be, and you won't believe the amount of calories you can eat, especially on refeeds. So, you know, another anecdotal. Brian, cool, Brian. Yep. Another anecdotal. You know, I'm sitting down for my first Indian meal in Aruba, which was fantastic, and so many options there that are vegan, or at least at this restaurant. And then the second time I went there, sat down for like a 6-course meal. Because the first time I went there, by the time I got back to my hotel, I was hungry. So, you know, the next time I go there, it's like, and you and I are going to be hitting up the Indian food restaurants in Kelowna and leaving them have to reorder their stock before their usual. But, you know, let's just get past this, folks. The whole point being, here I am talking about low protein, and I'm in Toronto Airport. There it is, right on a tablet screen. Did you get your protein? I go to a vegan restaurant, and what do they have on their shelves? Vegan protein powder for sale. Yesterday, I was at the pharmacy real quick, and they had a whole display of Vega, the vegan protein. None of this is essential. None of it matters. Forget about it. So, like I said, you don't even need to crunch the numbers, but if you did, it would be more like 80-10-10. So, and we also know now, I meant to include, but I forgot, we can recycle our essential amino acids. We now know that. So Stephen's just saying he's experiencing the same thing. The more carbs, fiber he eats, the leaner he gets. And also the more you can eat. So it's really, really cool. And for me, going on 57, who haven't been sort of surprised like by anything in the nutrition world in the last 25 years, it's kind of like, okay, there's research on things I already knew, but there was no hard right-hand turns and definitely no fireworks. Now there is, and this is a really cool time to be doing. The problem for us, I think now, Andy, for you and me, the virile vegans, is to be in the convincing business without being in the convincing business. I think that's the next thing.
I agree. But the person that always tries to be right ends up being right for the wrong reasons, right? So,
well, we're going to present the research.
You can't force. Yeah, no. I mean, you can present the research, but I mean, again, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? So.
Right. And what we want to do is not lead the horse to water. We want to make the horse thirsty enough to go there himself. It's just like what you said about your dad. I mean, your dad has two young sons who are both vegans, but he can't get there himself. So, we have to keep that in. We have to keep that in mind for ourselves as well moving forward. And as Ange has been so excited and chomping at the bit, so to speak, Ange is all about, I got that food issues course coming out, and she's all about now cycle diet vegan version. Like what's the difference? What's the similarity? Blah, blah, blah. Well, one of the differences is how much you can friggin' eat, because it's my metabolism has been reborn, so.
I thought I could eat a lot before, and it certainly increased on my refeed days too, if you can believe that.
yeah, that's something I got to witness, but we'll do that for sure. So with that, I think I should sign out. We're way over the hour mark, so people are going to lose interest. So on that note, we'll be back next week with something interesting. But again, the whole protein essential and protein in fitness and protein in muscle is a con job that's been around for decades. It's finally being exposed, and we're trying to expose it to you, and do with that what you will. But we'll present the research. Hopefully, you're open-minded enough to consider it and then act on that consideration. Final words, bud?
Yeah, I've been loving the whole new vegan lifestyle. I definitely. It's certainly opened up my eyes as far as protein goes. Like I said, I mean, you don't even have to try to get 30 grams of protein a day. That's probably what I'm eating. Like,
yeah,
I mean, it's so that's how much we need though. Like, I mean, my performance in the gym is still great. I'm keeping all my muscle. People are asking me if I'm getting ready for a show. So obviously I'm not melting away or anything. So
right.
It's coming off. It's coming off in the right places, right? So.
We'll talk about that in the next episode, because I'm still getting people asking me, hey, will you talk about what changes have you noticed, and what about the gym, and what about your energy, and all these other things. So we'll do that. So
yeah.
Alex is just asking, do I do custom vegan diet service? I do custom diets for anybody, Alex, regardless of what their approach is. So, but that's it for us for this week, and then we'll be back. I'm back. So I might have Tales from Aruba in the next podcast, or I'll meet with Andy tomorrow over coffee, and we'll put our noggins together and see if we got something else. So hopefully you guys like this. If so, you got to hit the share button. JP's just saying 30 grams of protein for Andy. Awesome. Yeah, I'm not far behind him. I doubt I'm taking in much more than that myself. There's people taking even less, and they get leaner and leaner, and no signs of ill health. But I keep saying I'm going to end the podcast, so I better. So obviously I must have missed the podcasting because I'm rambling on. Andy, thanks, buddy. And I'll see you tomorrow. And I'll see you all next week. By all means, please hit your share buttons and your emoticons. Let us know you're loving us. And of course, on my YouTube channel. We'll see you all next time.